Time Lords are one of the oldest races in the Doctor Who universe, and by their own account, the first to master time travel. They took it upon themselves to watch over the timelines and safeguard the integrity of the universe by imposing the web of time. This was done in the early years of Gallifreyan history, after the times of Pythia, and much of the development of the species into Lords of Time was credited to Rassilon. This individual worked on both regeneration and the realization of time travel as a reality. However, he was not alone. Among the companions at his side was one known as Peylix, and later, Omega. Hi, Rick here, and we're looking today at the ancient history of Gallifrey and the character of Omega, also known as Omegon and Ohm, a compatriot of Rassilon, close enough to give him the nickname Raz. Around this time, known as the Dark Ages of Gallifrey, the two were studying engineering together and forged a strong bond. Peylix wrote an essay during his education where he hypothesized the use of a supernova and black holes to create power sources, and was given the grade Omega, a fail mark. Instead, so determined that his science was correct, he adopted it as a new name in traditional Gallifreyan fashion. In this time, Gallifrey was a spacefaring empire managing fleets of starbreakers. Rassilon began his rise to power, and Omega rose with him. The two geniuses accompanied by one other, making a name for themselves among the people. Soon, Omega and Rassilon were ready to test out their calculations, and they constructed the Hands of Omega, a pair of stellar manipulators that could control a star's activity and life cycle. The aim was to force the star to supernova in order to harness the energy for Gallifrey, with the end goal being time travel. Rassilon assembled a fleet of starbreakers, including the Eurydice, Omega's vessel, and travelled to a Q-type star, Quaba, in the constellation of Owl. The devices worked as intended. However, disaster soon followed. Omega's vessel was destroyed by the event when the stasis halo failed and pulled into the resulting black hole. Some say that it was sabotage from a future party trying to stop the creation of the Time Lords. Some whisper that Rassilon had grown wary of his friend's growing popularity and, fearing a rival, had an assassin foil the experiment. Others still simply assume Omega's calculations were off and his own hubris led to his seeming demise. The events are not known in earnest, as it was a tumultuous era for the would-be Time Lords, and history is written by the surviving. However, Omega survived this event and was pulled into an alternate universe, one of antimatter, a perilous existence indeed for one born of normal space-time. Matter and antimatter are opposites of each other, and by coming into contact with one another, they annihilate, releasing tremendous amounts of energy. In this universe, however, the laws of creation were still young, and Omega found that he could alter his surroundings by will alone. One of the first things he did was to create a suit of armour to protect himself from the antimatter realm, something he would continue to wear for his entire imprisonment. Outside of the antimatter universe, Rassilon mourned for his lost friend and moved ahead with his experiments. It is for this reason that Rassilon is often cited as the inventor of Time Lord society, and he went on to perfect Omega's work, calling the newly created singularity the Eye of Harmony. He relocated the star to Gallifrey, likely using the dimensional sciences similar to that found in TARDISes, and from here built the Time Lords into the empire that spanned across all of space and time, by force where necessary. The genius of Omega was told posthumously to future generations of Time Lords, and his work became the very foundations of time travel. The Doctor in his youth considered Omega one of the greatest minds of Gallifrey and a personal hero. Meanwhile, as the eons passed and the Time Lords grew and prospered, Omega grew to feel naught but despair, for although he was becoming ever more accustomed to his manipulation of his prison, he was alone in this universe. He even attempted to create new life, which he managed with mixed results. Among his abominations were simple blobs of sentient antimatter, and gel-like creatures. As he grew more experienced with his creations, he began to manufacture beings such as the Ergon. This power was known as Psychosynthesis. Effectively immortal in his own universe, Omega became capable of reaching out to the realm of normal space through weak points in its fabric, such as black holes. He began to siphon power from Gallifrey through a black hole and drew the attention of the Timelords, who sent through several incarnations of the Doctor to discover the cause. You see, Omega had spent the millennia bringing order and stability to his empty universe, but doing so had inexorably bound his will to its very laws. His psychosynthesis powers, fueled by his extensive willpower, was all that was holding the realm together, meaning that even if he found a way to escape, doing so would collapse his creation on him the instant he tried to leave. For this reason, he decided to lure in a Time Lord to take his place as Atlas and hold his world together, while he switched places and returned to Gallifrey. His mind, however, was warped from years of perceived abandonment, and on learning of his place in Gallifrey's annals as a hero, he is quoted as saying, "A hero? I should have been a god." However, further tragedy was soon discovered when he attempted to remove his antimatter suit, and discovered that the radiation of this universe had long since destroyed his physical form. He was now only a mind alive by his own will, and seemingly forever bound to the antimatter universe. Even if he could fashion another body, it would be made from antimatter and incompatible with the end space. Sadly, this also means that Omega's own recollections of life after the dark times of Gallifrey could not be trusted, due to the degradation of his mind. He was foiled by the Doctor and in his grief and rage seemingly died when the second Doctor's recorder, still composed of matter, made contact with antimatter and detonated. Omega, though being only will, survived and was trapped in a time bubble. It took him a long time to recover, but soon set about luring vessels into his pocket universe once again. Hedin, a Time Lord of the Pryden chapter and one of the High Council, took pity on Omega's circumstance and learned of his survival. He began to collude with Omega to grant him his return and place him at the head of the Time Lords. Doing so necessitated that Omega have a body composed of matter. Supplying Omega with a compatible biodata readout, basically an organic schematic, the Doctor was once again involved in the return of Omega. The Arc of Infinity was a region of space around a former Q-type star, where the dimensional walls were weak, and Omega managed to construct a duplicate of the Fifth Doctor's body and inhabit it. Originally composed of antimatter, the conversion process was interrupted by the Doctor, and the incomplete Omega fled into our realm, specifically Amsterdam, thinking himself free at last. However, his body, within minutes, began to revert to antimatter and react with the surrounding matter. The Doctor was forced to seemingly kill Omega when he refused to return to the antimatter universe, electing death over imprisonment. If Omega had remained, then his conversion would have caused a massive explosion of matter-antimatter reactions. The legacy of Omega continued in Time Lord culture long after his demise, with numerous inventions of his being used still to this day, including the living metal Validium. A myriad of dangerous devices were also locked within the Omega Arsenal, so named after Omega. There even exists a cult called the Adherents of Om, who continued to believe that Omega is the rightful god of the universe. Omega's tale is a sad one, in my opinion. Driven mad by bitterness, he eventually yearned to be free to return to Gallifrey, even simply his normal existence, but this was warped with the desire for revenge. In his brief escape, in his final appearance, he stopped his flight from the Doctor in order to listen to a musical booth, simply enjoying being alive again. Though he did also murder a gardener within his first few minutes of being free, so... Thanks for watching this video on Omega, the co-founder of Timelord Society and arguably as influential as Rassilon or the Doctor himself. I really hope that one day we see the return of Omega, and I love his design, and I love the old Time Lord lore, something to which Omega is ingrained. Until the next video, I've been Rick, thanks again for watching, and goodbye.